Hello, welcome everybody to today's HR Huddle. It's July 12th. Hello, Jen.
Hey.
And we have a special guest here. Jana Cinnamon is the COO of Abdo Eichen Myers here in my hometown in Minnesota, in the Twin Cities. So welcome, Jana.
Thank you for having me. Excited to be here.
Yes, we're excited too, and we're excited about the topic, which is we want to explore mental health and its place in the workplace. So Jana's going to share some of the things that they're doing in their firm, and she has a little bit of passion about this topic, and so has some insights and ideas to share with us. But before we do that, we thought it might be important to say, why is this topic important in the workplace? And we think that there's still some questions maybe being batted around about mental health, like that's personal, that's about the individual. But we, as you know, think that people, and for your people to be successful in your firm, we need to look at them holistically, and they need to be supported. And we need to make sure that they're winning at home, in their life, personally, and at work. And it's hard to win at work if we're not successful in those other areas. And especially with this pandemic, the last 17 months, I'm saying 18 months now, this last over year, it's been really heightened, I think, and just looking at our mental health and making sure we're taking care of ourselves and the toll it has had, whether it's because we've been impacted directly by COVID ourselves or a loved one, or perhaps even death, but also just the trying to manage all the new ways of working with kids at home, or maybe I'm isolated and I'm home in an apartment all by myself in the city and the city is empty. There's all kinds of things that are happening in people's lives and situations that we need to figure out, gosh, how do we support our team members? How do we make sure that they're successful? And paying attention to mental wellness and mental health, we think, is a key component to do that. So, Jana, I thought I would jump in and just ask maybe a general question for you to maybe share about, and that is, what is your firm doing to support mental health, or maybe, why is this so important to you and your firm?
Yeah. Thanks for that question. I do think it is such a topic that is, I think we used the word earlier when we were talking, it's squishy. I think, my first job I had was working as a server. And if I had broken my foot, there would have been like, how are we going to handle that? What are we going to do? Because you need to walk around the restaurant to serve the food. And with the mental health conversation, that's a very different squishy thing, right? Of when somebody is dealing with depression or anxiety or whatnot, it's not so visible. It certainly is something that I think is a challenging conversation to have, but clearly would impact somebody's approach to work and what their performance is at work. And we can't separate the reality of a broken foot for a server and somebody struggling with their mental health in the workplace. And certainly the last 18 months have made it very much top of mind, as I think all of us, and I've said this to people, have experienced some trauma. We had to experience something that's a once in a lifetime, once in a generation type of experience. And there was a lot of uncertainty, a lot of unknowns. And so it really became top of mind. I would say previously, quite honestly, within our firm, I felt like mental health was kind of an event in terms of we would have a lunch and learn occasionally, and we would feel like we did our part for that. Or we would have some kind of awareness that we tried to bring to it, once a year. And what has changed over the last 18 months is really more of a multi-pronged approach and weaving it into the conversation of the everyday. So a lot of how I think we've progressed in this in our firm is building it into our frequent communications about whatever the topic may be. So we are bringing it up to encourage people to take care of their mental health. We want to encourage people to take time off, to disconnect. We've given some extra time off and so forth. And we're always referring to our priority as a firm is your mental health and your well-being. And we know that that comes through, addressing that, taking time off, doing what you need to do. And so I think weaving it in throughout the communications, as well as, raising the awareness through things like lunch and learns we continue to do. We're regularly sharing articles on our intranet of various topics. I know one thing like the Adam Grant languishing article. If you haven't checked that out, just Google Adam Grant and languishing and you'll find it. We had a lot of great conversations in our firm just from sharing content or articles and getting people to talk about things that just really connected with them. We do, and we have had for years, resources for our employees, of course, through our employee assistance program and so forth. And again, it's been raising awareness, building communication, kind of uncovering more what that actually means and how that process works. So I would say it's making sure that mental health isn't just an event or an awareness piece, but again, weaving it into the everyday within our firm.
Awesome. Well, so, what we were talking a little bit there was the idea that we have a stigma associated with it, right? So, we don't talk about it normally. And you, Jana, great analogy. If my foot is broken, they're going to make accommodations. If my spirit is a little bit broken, how can they tell? And will they accommodate? I mean, I think that that's probably the reason that most people don't bring it forward is the stigma, and then the fear that it won't be accommodated or that there is no solution or answer. There's a resource that we found when we were researching mental health last year for providing resources to clients and folks, and it's the National Alliance on Mental Illness. And I was really impressed with all the research they had, but also the strategies and ideas and resources. But one of the resources said that 20%, 1 in 5 people will experience some sort of mental illness every single year. So this is not isolated. This is not sort of like a 1 in 100 or maybe one person in our firm every 5 years. I mean, it's 20% of us in any given year. And so serious issue. From your perspective, as a leader in your firm that's guiding HR and other operational areas, what has your firm done besides keeping it top of mind in terms of pointing people to resources or looking for signs? I mean, wherever you want to pick up, what are some of the things that you have done as a leader, but also maybe other leaders in your firm are doing?
One of the things I think that comes to mind is the vulnerability piece, right? Of being able to speak to the own challenges or experiences that I have had with mental health. I think that's the big thing, because certainly mental health, it does not discriminate, right? It's not that once you make it to a certain job level or anything that you are now immune from that, right? Or if you have some kind of, measure of success. And I would say that has been one of the things personally I have done and tried to model, is to make it a more open conversation. And so, for example, it was probably about 2 years ago, I, for the first time in my life, decided to go to therapy after experiencing some significant loss in my life. One of my best friends passed away from brain cancer. I lost my grandma. I held her hand as she passed away. And I experienced a significant health scare with my daughter, and it just kind of all, came together at the same time. And while I've always considered myself a very strong person and able to navigate some challenging life circumstances, I really realized I needed to take care of that mental health, my mental health, before it became an issue. And so I proactively sought out some help, and I shared that with people. I talked about it with people. I wouldn't even necessarily make it a thing, as sometimes I would say, oh, I've got to run, I've got my therapy appointment, and some of that just, it's, being willing and able to share takes away some of that stigma around it, and I think helps to open people within the firm to talking more about it. And I've learned through sharing my own story how many other people in the firm have experienced mental health issues themselves, or with family members, or their experiences with therapy and so forth. So I think vulnerability and openness and transparency is a big thing. I found I grew up with family members that deal with significant anxiety issues. And that's something I really hadn't experienced for myself. And I think, quite honestly, the not really compassionate side of myself would find myself, just kind of shaking my head and saying, they're making excuses, and they don't want to do something, and they're just using anxiety as a crutch, and all of that. It's because I hadn't experienced it. And I think it's hard to know what mental health is. Again, it's such a squishy thing. And while I still don't consider myself somebody who necessarily deals with a ton of anxiety compared to some of my family members, the more I've begun to ask questions and talk to other people, the more that I'm understanding it. And I think that that's a piece of it. We've talked so much in the last year about diversity, equity, and inclusion, and a lot of that has come to building our own awareness, right? And the same thing needs to happen with mental health, is understanding people's experiences and, all of the different ways people experience depression, anxiety, and so forth. As much as we can be vulnerable, other people may be willing to share as well.
I love that comparison to DE&I and the learning that we've been doing, the past year or so, also longer than that for many, I know, but, really, took front and center this past year, and the learning for mental health. And, I think anxiety or depression or, other, mental health concerns, even grieving, like we've had a lot of grieving happening, whether it's, for the loss of a loved one, or grieving for jobs, or grieving for, loss of, our life, our activities, and so I think people demonstrate that differently. Anxiety looks different in one person compared to others. Like if we were to compare the three of us, or depression, it's going to maybe show up different for us. So how do you recommend people, look for the signs, or what might they notice? I think there might be some outward and maybe not so outward, signs to look for. And I think that's confusing too.
Yeah, certainly the thing that comes to mind right away is relationships, and how much relationships matter through this, because if you don't really know somebody, I think it can be hard to tell if something has changed or is going on, as well as that if you don't have a strong relationship, the ability to speak up and say something if you are struggling is not there, or vice versa. If you witness something, if you don't really have a strong relationship, you may hold back from saying something when you really should. And so I do think the relationships are really key. And I think some of the tools that we've maybe used in the past to identify mental health look different now. I think, in the past, I may have observed that somebody was coming into the office later, or that they maybe looked more disheveled, or, maybe they looked like they were kind of falling asleep in a meeting, or whatever it may be. And now it's different, right? We're only seeing a square kind of into their life, and it takes some more intentionality to figure that out. And so I do think certainly you can continue to read body language in meetings. I think making sure that you have some camera on time with all of your people to read, again, body language and so forth. I do think the one-on-one connections, kind of gauging and how people are presenting themselves in those meetings, what their words, actions are. Productivity certainly as well. I think we all had to adjust in the last year, and our productivity did take a hit, or looked different than maybe what it had before. I think a lot of us found out how to be productive, and it could have masked some mental health things that were there. But I do think a lot of the just relationship checking in and so forth on a regular basis, right? And slowing down things a bit, not always necessarily just, getting to business, but making sure there is time to read into the conversation and really look at each person. I've found in some meetings, we have so many people's faces on the screen. And when I'm leading meetings, it can be hard to kind of look at everybody in the way where I maybe would have been able to read the room better if we had been in person. And so now I have to find time during meetings to kind of pause and really look at each window, right? And see, what am I seeing? Right? And to not be afraid to follow up with people afterwards and say, hey, I felt like maybe something was off in today's meeting. How are you? What are you doing? How are you doing? I think it's those connections are going to make the world a difference.
Mm-hmm.
Having the care there, having that relationship beforehand is helpful. Yeah. So rapport with all of our people is critical. I love the idea of the camera on time with all people sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes. And asking the question, we love the question, how are you really? How are you really?
Yeah.
Not like, how are you transactionally, I'm just tossing it around, but hey, how are you really? Or how are things going in your life? I'm interested, and just being quiet then and letting them ramble and say whatever they're going to say. And I think that's awesome. Another sign I want to throw out there is this. There's a lot being written right now about pandemic brain. And it's, it's a fuzziness or a lack of concentration or lack of memory, inability to kind of remember specifics of things that you would normally remember. And they're saying that a lot of us are suffering from that, or, it's a high percentage of people that are noting that they just feel like their cognitive processing isn't all that. And they're saying that that's about this sort of sustained trauma that we've experienced. I've been calling it psychic bruising. We've all had psychic bruising of some kind, and you can't see psychic bruises. You don't know what they are. So the only way is to engage in that conversation. I love it. I really do. So what about resources? What sort of resources, if you feel like somebody needs counseling or would benefit from counseling, or maybe they need to check themselves against signs, or, you want to somehow point them to resources, how are you all handling that at this stage?
Yeah, we do have some benefits, certainly through our employee assistance program that we're pointing people to. With our benefits program as well, we're having some resources there. In one-on-one conversations, we are definitely directing people to our HR team and really training our partners and our managers to not just tell their people, hey, go see HR, but that our partners and managers are bringing to our attention, hey, I had this conversation, so that if the employee doesn't come to us, that we can go to them. And yes, we've found some resources that, we are linking to, we're making some direct introductions to some of the carriers that we work with that they provide. Those have been, really most beneficial for us. And what we've found is that the vendors that we've been working with, this is really top of mind for them, and they're trying to put things together that are helpful as well. So I encourage certainly firm leaders to be talking to their benefits providers, their employee assistance program, and really making sure they understand it. For example, our EAP increased the number of mental health visits, counseling visits that they provide on a yearly basis, right? And so it's making sure, again, that we communicate that, we explain how to get that help, what that means, all of that. Others are definitely stepping up in this area, and that's helped us a ton.
That's awesome. Our benefits carrier waived the copay last year.
Yeah.
And so, which I didn't even realize, I found out about it through my provider. And so that was awesome. In addition to making telehealth available, which, again, we can make that work. It's not always ideal in situations, but there's options, there's flexible options. And so, just being able to do that. And Jana, I love how you're making it safe to have the conversation. I think that's one of the things that we might worry about. Maybe I have a concern, about a colleague, but I don't feel like it's my place to say something, or I just direct them like that's an HR issue. Okay, fine. If we have to have it in workplace, that's an HR issue versus it's, these are my people, I care about these people, and these are my, team members, and making it okay to do that. I had a family member that, was in college, and one of the college peers called his father and to have the courage to be able to do that. But it's from that care and concern, and it's okay. And he said, I just can't believe that you had the guts to call me and thank you. And you should encourage this, with the rest of your peers, and watch out for each other, because you never know, you don't let it go unsaid. I think that's the other message, is we just cannot let it go unsaid, or like offhanded conversations or offhanded comments. It's like we gotta like have a keen ear to that and check in and just say, hey, I just heard you say that. So I love how you're integrating that. Is there anything else that you would want to share or add or impart to our viewers and listeners of the recording here?
Yeah, no, I would build upon what you just said there in terms of kind of building that culture of caring. And I think that this is really, it's for all of us. It's not the top down. Certainly as leaders, we need to lead the way and model, by example and all of that. But that is something that I have really tried to do with my team, is to pause at the end of our team meetings and talk about, how are people doing? But to recognize we're all dealing with some big challenges and we've had to navigate a lot. And I encourage and I recognize the ways that my team are supporting one another and the way that they're looking out for one another and connecting with it. I am one person and I cannot connect with 170 people in our firm in a meaningful way on a regular basis. But I have a team that when we, work together, we really multiply that effect. And so I think it is really encouraging others to do the same and to talk about caring and to talk about that, which again is squishy, but it makes the world a difference. And I think that that's something as leaders we have to ask of our people, right, is to do that and to be intentional to say that that is valued and appreciated. I think the other thing that came to mind as we were talking, I think one of the things that I found to be challenging in terms of the keeping our radar up and being aware of what's going on is I feel like all of our meetings can feel the same in Zoom, right? Like the meetings blur together because I'm sitting in the same spot with the same background, with the same windows in front of me. And I think that there's an opportunity for us to get creative and to try to create some distinction. While we still will have Zoom meetings going forward, what can we do to maybe create some more distinct meetings that take us outside of the day-to-day? Because that's when we might actually have some better, not that fatigue, that pandemic fatigue, if we can break some of that and we can get outside of the cycle and kind of break it a bit. So, is it saying, hey, everybody on this meeting, we want you to unplug from your desk, grab your laptop and head outside, or something. And it does something to break up the day-to-day routine and the fatigue and so forth. I think pull on that creative muscle a bit and be willing to try some new things, because I think right now with mental health and the fatigue and so forth, we've just got to try pulling some different levers and seeing what feels good. It takes some being willing to experiment and try goofy, funny things, because you might find something that really just made it feel better for people that day.
I love that. That's great. Well, I think we're about at time here. I know the three of us probably could discuss this topic for a while. So we just really appreciate you coming, Jana, and sharing both your story, but also, what you are doing and encouraging and what others are doing, at your firm. And so thank you for doing that. This is such an important topic. And Emily did post some resources in here as we were talking. She posted that languishing article plus the National Alliance for Mental Illness. So if you want other resources, reach out to us or Jana, and we would be happy to engage with you on that or have a conversation or share some resources. So thank you very much. This is a great topic. Hope you have a great rest of the week. Good second half of July. And we will be back next week. Jen and Renee are going to be back next week. And I think we're going to talk about salaries. So look forward to that. So thank you very much.
Thank for having me.
Bye. Thank you, Jana.